Dude, we're actually garbage at making conversation. Okay, so
Or
what I wanted to talk about today was the fact that Overwatch, the competitive game, has sort of been out for a solid almost 6 months now, and it's had a lot of hype throughout like its life and even during the beta stages. And despite having a lot of backing from Blizzard in terms of esports, as they have done with multiple titles, like all of their past games, pretty much. It I imagine it probably won't be an esport that we can that can rival like things like League of Legends and CS:GO for at least another 2 years. But I know you have some differing opinions on that.
yeah, I don't know much about the history of CS:GO as I entered the gaming scene more or less with Season 2 League of Legends, which was a point where that competitive scene was still very underdeveloped as well. However, I think that just like there's this argument about League of Legends being a casual game which gets advertised through the competitive scene, that Overwatch has a similar concept in mind. You did mention stuff like noise or spectator features which cause Overwatch to be a terrible game to watch, which I agree with. But the thing is, wouldn't it be a trade-off for Blizzard and for the entire colorfulness and happiness which the game sort of tries to convey if they start reducing visual clutter and adding certain I mean, for the spectator features particularly, if you add another line which represents the line of sight, how are you going to distinguish that in a way that is easily recognizable among all the other gazillion of particles and other things flying over the screen?
Okay, so sort of my issue with that is that unlike what Riot has done with League of Legends, where they're they haven't really since the start of the LCS, when initially they were really like the leaders of the industry, right? They haven't really pushed the bar any further. They've sort of stayed at the status quo, and they don't really particularly invest in the esports scene and sort of growing it. So what they do is they set aside a certain amount of money, and they've said throughout the years that they don't make a lot of money, if any, off esport events, right? And
You are
so,
talking about the esport events implicitly though, as in the money they make through skin sales, which are like caused by that event, aren't included because that
yeah,
makes them
yes.
a lot
So
of
like directly, like I'm
yeah.
talking about monetary value from just like ticket sales, right?
Mhm.
So they they haven't really pushed like the like amount of investment any further. Well, what we've seen from Blizzard and from what they've said in their statements is they're specifically targeting the esports scene, and they're like sort of trying to grow it, whether it be directly through having their world championship it is at BlizzCon this year, or just like developing the game further, right? And they've done that with Hearthstone, Heroes of the Storm, and now Overwatch, right? And but the issue arises in the fact that they do have this sort of parody where they're like, "Oh, we want it to be like a super casual game, and we want it to be like accessible to everybody, and like you can just pop in like once a month and play with your friends, and it'll be super fun." But then they're also like, "This is the fucking hardest core competitive game you've seen in your life," right? And I don't think that sort of parody works. So while it might work with things like Hearthstone, and it doesn't really, because we've seen like no consistency in the competitive scene because of the amount of like RNG that goes on in that game. But while it might to some extent work in that game in terms of viewership numbers and like size of events, in Overwatch I think that in order for the scene to grow, there needs to be further development in the way that we view the game. So whether it be stripping certain like unnecessary visual clutter from first person perspectives, or adding additional sort of lines of sight or ways of viewing maps. Um, and it's also up to tournament organizers to have observers that are better trained for a more fast paced game. But just the fast paced nature of Overwatch itself, and and the amount of like colorfulness it has, I think really diminishes its value as an esport, especially currently, right?
So you're saying that for it to be where it is in 2 years, and you are predicting that it will be at that point in 2 years, they're gonna shift it away from the casualness and convert it more of a not what looks pretty black and white CS:GO to me to a colorful version of that.
Yeah, I would say that as the years go by, as like the years go by, we're either gonna see a shift from the huge amount of like clutter that there is on the screen to, at least in the spectator mode, options to where we can lower some of those settings down, right? So you're gonna see the ability to like strip assets away. For example, when playing Mercy in first person perspectives, when you're playing the game, you have this sort of indicator that tells you, oh, you can fly towards this person with your shift, right? And it's sort
Yes.
of like a box around them. And while that's great for the player, when viewing the game as an esport, it actually works to its detriment because it's a bunch of visual clutter that doesn't give the viewer any additional information about what's happening. And while the player might find it super useful that, oh, okay, I have my thing, it's not on cooldown, I can fly towards that person, uh, the spectator doesn't necessarily need that information at all. If you just fly towards them, they'll understand what's happening much better than if you have like a bunch of like indicators flying about everywhere. And in addition, I think it's a big problem that a lot of the time Pete's observers aren't switching from first person perspectives, right?
Yeah, that you're stuck with like slept Zarya watching her own ulti or something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. So like the other day I was watching the Overwatch Open and they were playing Dorado, which is a naturally dark map, right? And there was a Zarya using her ultimate. Um, and at one point she gets hit by Anadart, and instead of for the second the like duration of her ultimate, the observer switching to like a third person view or like an over the top view, uh, we were stuck for like 6 or 7 seconds with just Zarya being on the like looking straight at the ground, and the fight just going around it, right?
What is the solution to that issue in CS:GO?
I
Yes, there are
mean,
no stuns as such, but people do tend to sit in awkward spaces and like hide behind certain corners and so on for
well, I think that
extended periods of time.
in CS:GO, due to the fact, like, due to the way games are, like the game is played, you always have somebody who's moving around. There's always something interesting going on, and
Yeah,
once,
but that's the same in Overwatch. The question is what is the difference between those observers, or what is their, are they just better? Are they
like,
trained? Are
I
they?
think I think that you can't really go. Well, they are more trained. They've had more experience with the game, right? We've had what, almost 5 years. Well, maybe not, like, let's say 4 years of really big like CS:GO events. So they are more trained and have more experience. But I think it's more of a fact that you can never go wrong. Like, whoever you pick, you might pick the person that dies in like an aim duel in CS:GO, and that will be a suboptimal choice. But you'll never end up just watching a person who's like doing nothing, because once a round gets going in CS:GO, you'll always, as long as you pick someone that's in the main like site where like bomb site where
Yeah,
the big
not
fight
the
is
guy
happening.
scouting on the other side.
Exactly. So as long as you pick the one person from the main fight, you'll always have at least some context about what's going on. While in Overwatch, just due to like the way stuns work and things, you have to have observers that switch out of first person mode much more liberally.
What do you think about doing it automatically, like the league when you spectate somebody and there's like the dynamic spectator thingy?
Yeah, but I don't think League actually uses that when in pro
No,
games.
no. But wouldn't it be interesting to have maybe a combination of an observer and the computer Like whenever somebody gets stunned, it just switches out of it like instantly, or whenever a big ultimate is blown, it goes into third person around that ultimate.
I mean,
I mean, that's basically where all the action is ever gonna happen.
yeah. So all the action is gonna happen generally in team fights, and you don't see a lot of emphasis in Overwatch being on 1v1 aim duels like you do in CS:GO.
Yeah.
So I think that perhaps a system that does switch out of first person mode when certain conditions are met, such as a big ult like Zarya ult hit 4 people, maybe like
Just like the League
one of the ways
spectator
to go,
does it.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, exactly. Although the issue may arise with the fact that that might feel quite janky, because when you use the League spectator, you have to remember that you have a 3-minute delay between when the spectator camera, between like when the play happens and when the spectator actually has to like decide what
Oh, all
the
right. I see. Yeah.
right. So you have a lot more processing time. You don't have to have these sort of janky.
And
We're
you can
looking at one
decide
person.
between what play and so on.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So there's like time to predict the location of the camera, and I think that might be an issue that like we see, but I think the main issue is that just watching Overwatch from a first person perspective, even when there would generally be context on the screen, the like value of the context is completely diminished by the fact that that you can very easily get lost in all the abilities getting fired off, right? And it's not just the colorfulness, it's also just the speed of the game. Like a team fight can be over within 3 seconds, and if you haven't given the viewer a perspective that sort of takes in the whole picture, you can end up with
A
over
very
over time you're gonna end up with a barrier to watch, which you really don't want in any esports game. You want to be able to uh, have as much context and allow the user to make as much sense of a certain situation as possible. So if I'm somebody who's played Overwatch 0 hours or like maybe 10 hours in my life and just sort of know what the fuck's going on, I want to be able to come into the game, like come into an esports event, watch the Twitch stream, and have at least some semblance of what's going on. And while that wasn't necessary for League, which still has a really bad like new viewer experience, I
well.
think
Eventually, that's not even changeable at this point.
well,
Like,
yeah, in League definitely not, but in Overwatch it still is, because if you
it's a
give
damn shooter game. It's simple, right?
exactly, so the basic point in shoot concept is still there. While it does have some complexity to it, with the different heroes and how things interact and things like that, and that you have in League as well, that makes it a more complex viewing experience. It'll be in Overwatch. It'll be a lot easier to sort of optimize the spectator tools to allow um, a new viewer to understand at least what's going on. While they might not understand all the nuances, which is fine, they're gonna understand the basic concepts, and then you can have casters and analysts that sort of bring in those key little details that you might have missed as a viewer. But currently, you see that even casters are getting quite confused about what's happening.
mm, about the, could it be that it's okay? I know that according to certain statistical sites, it's pretty average when you're around like 2.5 to 2.9 elo, but honestly, personally, I wouldn't. I played League on like Diamond 3 level for quite a while, and I'd say, well, based on my age and reaction speed, I'm not too terrible at, having spatial awareness and reacting to stuff that happens on the screen. And yet, I find myself, especially when playing certain champions, such as Tracer, for example, like so often I'm just like, where the fuck am I? um, so is it perhaps a thing that's even an issue for the players? I mean, I guess it's a fair issue because both sides have the same problem, but I don't think that it's a concept which is going to be too successful. in any case. Like even if they clear up spectator, then you either go into the competitive side and ignore the more casual player base, or you change the competitive game from the casual one, and that doesn't work either. We've seen that on some instances where in like StarCraft 2, where where they like patched it for the competitive game, and it was just impossible for the casual player base, because certain things work in competitive or don't, but they have very skewed results in the casual thing. So could it be that Overwatch is just not made to be competitive? I mean,
Well,
it seems to be a trend of Blizzard to just, we're just gonna pump so much money into this game, into the competitive scene, so we're gonna force it to make it work, because wherever there's money, there's gonna be people who are gonna try to get to that money, therefore play competitive, etc. And obviously some people are gonna reach a level which is respectable, but for example, Hearthstone, in my opinion, was never made to be a competitive game. Like they made Hearthstone out of the idea of a small team being like, hey, can we make a card game? Would that be fun? You know, and then it was fun, and then they said, okay, now let's make it competitive. But even though I watched a fair bit of Hearthstone, I could never relate to the players, because the metas of the game and the amount of cards that got released patch after patch changed the players that play the game so quickly that every new tournament there were like 20 new players I've never heard of, just because their specific meta and set of cards is just optimal for their understanding of randomness, I suppose.
well, I think that what we saw in Hearthstone was that initially Blizzard wasn't going hardcore at the competitive scene, and we saw a sort of demand or like drive to create competitive um, tournaments in Hearthstone from the community, because we saw huge streaming numbers for people like Trump, right? And
But they were playing the game that everybody wanted to play. It's like when Bjergsen streams and has more viewers than LCS.
yeah, yeah, but what we so these huge streaming numbers are, I think, what led to like the competitive scene in Hearthstone like starting out, and then Blizzard was like, all right, there's money here, throw some more. Um, and I think that led to Hearthstone, the competitive game, being born. But my problem with Hearthstone, the competitive game, is that um, it's just not as fun to watch as like knowing what both players have gets rid of all the enjoyment for me, right? While watching like a single point of view stream, I can always sort of have that level
What
of
would I do in this situation?
yeah, exactly. Like, what would I do? And like this sort of level of tension with, oh, this guy's supposed to have Garrosh Hellscream in his deck. Like, is he gonna pull it out? Like, if he does, what's gonna happen? Like, I might lose the game, but like if he doesn't, I can totally like win in 2 turns. And sort of that sort of analysis from the player point of view is what was a draw for me when watching Hearthstone streams, right? But all of that is very much gone as soon as you can see what like the cards that both players have in their hand.
It's also what I noticed whenever I watch the Hearthstone event, is that the casters sort of know. Well, I guess they're supposed to know, but they're like, as somebody who never really understood the game beyond the first patch with like the new cards and what the meta is. Like I was a player of the freeze mage time with like
Yeah.
double ice block and so on, where you just wait for the 7 damage 10 mana card thingy. Um, so after that, I never understood the meta, but whenever I watched even that meta, it felt like the casters saw the cards and were like, all right, this guy's going to do exactly those 5 turns, because that's
Yeah.
the most effective way. And then, oh, look, he draws this card. That means like goes down the Excel list, looks which sequence of turns, and then just tells us the analysis. And then, tada, the player does exactly that, because, there's an Excel sheet for which cards lead to what play, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that made it like, oh well, so we're basically just watching two people getting paid to draw cards and check which play to do it. Like, there's no, not I'm saying that Overwatch Hearthstone players are not skilled players of playing games, but and their decision making is still remarkable, but it just feels like it's 90% of how lucky they are at drawing cards, and then
It is like
10% of, and that's just not fun, because if we both sit down and we make a game where whoever draws the better card wins, it's gonna be more fun than watching two people do that.
yeah, okay, definitely. So what I think that going back to Overwatch, what I think that makes the like I think there is enough interesting things and small adaptations that teams can make to where the competitive scene, like watching the competitive game from an analytical like standpoint and a viewer standpoint, it can be super interesting, right? So something that we noticed the other day when we were watching the Overwatch Open was that teams generally use high ground to like their advantage much more than what we've seen in the casual game from like our personal experience, right?
Yep.
And I think it's these
Just
small
run in, boys. Just run in.
just run in, just hold that
Go, go,
Reinhardt
go.
shield up. No
Yeah.
worries, we're gonna win. So I think that there are adaptations to strategies and sort of meta picks and like people's skills on certain champions that make the game interesting and can help build the sort of storylines that we see in other games, where like we see the like Bjergsen, who's like a super like aggressive player, like lots of individual skill. He's like always on the top of the NA like mid lane tier list, right? And then we can sort of follow. He plays these champions, doesn't play those champions, and it builds the storyline for the next split and the next split. And I think that Overwatch has that same potential, especially since they're not bogged down by like a single league like the LCS, where we can build these storylines from tournament to tournament. And there isn't ever, or from what we've seen, there isn't really going to be these huge sweeping changes that like where a team in a matter of like 2 weeks goes from number 1 to like number 7 best team in the world.
So you're talking about, like, to give an example, that there are like two tracer, like really good tracer players on each team, and like, I don't know, every tournament these two guys are just like, the game is basically decided by who can outplay the other tracer first, type of thing. And if it works out, then it's like, oh my god, such hype, and then next tournament the other guy beats him, and so on.
Exactly. So you can get those storylines going that engage viewers across multiple tournaments and across the scene as a whole. But I think that currently, just because of how hard it is to actually understand what's going on, the value of these storylines is, and like their impact on the game is really hard to notice, right? So you can see like Azaria when Azaria ults like 7 people and you're like, oh, yep, that's what they won, right? And if you're doing that consistently, as is going to happen, if you have people that are playing Zarya at a really high level, you're going to have like lots of multi-man ultimates, and then this is a super easy like an analytical thing to look at. But when you have nuances such as, oh, there's these two tracers that are always in the back of the map dueling each other, and if one kills the other and then has like the time to like go in and impact the main team fight, you have one team always winning out over the other, and then that happening over like a span of tournaments, and we see which player's better and like small adaptations they make. That's super hard to notice right now, and our ability to like even have the context and the knowledge of that happening is just based on what the casters and the analysis desk at events give us, right? So generally you're gonna like if two tracers just dashing across the screen, even if you're looking at it in third person perspective and only focusing on this tracer versus tracer fight, for example,
You don't see anything.
yeah, like you might understand that one tracer won over the other, and you might understand like the sort of basic impact that has on the entirety of the match or like that specific team fight. But over a long period of time, unless casters are really going hard at like emphasizing this fact to you and giving you the specific reasons to, okay, this tracer did this better and like the other one could have adapted in this way, if you don't have that context like sort of shoved down your throat, it's really difficult to understand what's happening in it, like, and why one team is better than the other one, especially considering that things like aim duels, unlike in CSGO where you can obviously like last year when Olaf Meister was the best player, you could obviously see that his like aim, his ability to flick, his like ability to pre-shoot and know where the enemy's gonna be is like far superior to most other players, and that allowed him to win a lot of aim duels. And if you see him go in headshot two people, you instantly know, okay, that's why they won the round. Like two out of the five people are dead, and now they're just gonna like the terrorists are gonna rush in and just take everybody out because it's a 5v3. And you could obviously say, okay, Olaf Meister and his like great aim allowed that to happen. While in Overwatch, you can have like super good aim, but if you're playing things like
It
Tracer,
doesn't matter.
exactly, if
Honestly, it doesn't matter because even though you're the best fucking player in the universe with aim and you like headshot 10 out of 10, there's like things like Zarya shield or Zenyatta ulti, you know, and it's just whatever.
yeah,
And like Reinhardt shield and line of sight issues and so on. So, but that links very nicely into the thing I was about to say. What if, and that's why I personally believe that Overwatch is going to grow just because of the sheer amount of money there is, but once the pros stop playing the game because it's not actually, you know, that cool of a game to play in the sense that uh, they play it, in my opinion, because, well, it's sort of fun, yes, but because there's an immense amount of money lying around just by Blizzard pumping it into the scene. And then eventually Blizzard is going to be like, well, but you know, viewer bases, etc., not really paying off, I suppose. And we watched at the ranked statistics of Overwatch. What's the name? Master Overwatch. And we were like amazed by super small player bases, right? Like maximum people in one rank was like 5,000 or something.
yeah, but that was based on statistics of like of people registered on that site, right?
Yeah, but still, I mean, if you look at similar things in like, I don't know, OPGG or something, and given that it's at the moment in a moment where they completely or mostly fixed competitive mode, you know, it's a new game, everybody wants to be ahead of the curve, so right now should be the hype. And I think it's simply gonna slow down and die out as a competitive game because in League, abilities and the way you move around the lane and the map matters because it's a slow process, right? And there is snowballing to it. Like if Bjergsen hits that 8 seconds cooldown spell now, how many spells in Overwatch even have 8 seconds cooldown?
Like non-ultimates.
Like non-ultimates. Like there aren't so many. Or like
Let
let's
me
say
think.
an early game spell like the Victor Graviton, which has like 15 seconds or something.
Yeah.
So he uses that and he uses it in a smart way, which zones off, let's say Jensen, right? Zones him off and then he loses 2 CS, he gets the level advantage. But all of that process takes like 60 seconds to complete.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's awesome because then look, Bjergsen just dumpstered Jensen in lane again. Jeez, I'm a Cloud9 fan, what am I doing? But it's relevant because then it snowballs and then Bjergsen roams first and kills bot lane and double lift gets like all the fame again and whatnot. And then on the other hand, on the complete contrary, we have CSGO, which has a new round every 2 minutes, correct me?
Yeah, 2 minute. Yeah, we have 2 minute run times. Yeah.
2 minute round times, and it basically 5 teams, new situation, no snowball except for the money, yes, okay. But no snowball
even,
as in the player
even that,
abilities.
exactly. Even like the economy in CS:GO, like you go
Can swing heavily.
Exactly. You can have like a team ecoing wins an eco. They bring the economy back, and we have like lose bonuses that increase over time. Like to
Exactly,
like
stuff
yeah.
like that. So what happens is every round is fresh, is new, is you know, the team can always come back. There's always this, yes, they can do it. And that is easy for the player to watch because, as you said, there's this fighting duel, there's like quick action, quick conclusions. Who is the god of CSGO? It's Olaf Meister or whatever.
Well, not currently, but yeah.
Not currently. And then Zack next round. And then maybe somebody else just steps it up and has this god mode round. And you don't have these moments really in League of Legends. There's maybe this one, you know, like a 0-1v4 outplay, which goes fairly fast. like the Phoenix is here against CLG 4-0 under third.
Okay. Yeah.
But then Overwatch is a combination of these two things. So it's like high impact, sort of semi-long cooldowns with ultimates charging, which are supposed to have high impact, but not really. But on the other hand, you can't actually go in and just aim duel and do something until both teams wait for their ultis to charge up. So I think what Overwatch needs to do is it needs to introduce a concept, something changing about the game balance-wise, that brings back hit scan and like offensive champions in general, because currently it's tank meta all the way.
Yeah. I
And it
think.
makes sense. Tank meta is always the best thing. Like it's mathematically, statistically, on principle, it's always the best thing to do unless offensive champions are horribly overpowered. But I think if people are actually forced to go out, just the way like lane swaps massively improved or decreased the quality of competitive League of Legends, and bringing them, like killing them, made it so much more fun to watch.
Did it?
That is what Overwatch needs. Yeah, yeah,
I
it did.
firmly disagree on that point, but we can argue that on another day.
Because
I
I
thought
don't
li-
want to. I
I thought
understand the fact that, yeah, okay, this is strategically intense and oh my god, yes, so many nuances. But eventually, if I watch how many LCS games? 36 on 2 regions?
sure.
Then I want Double If just putting his foot down on, like, mash me or whatever. And I just want to see him do that, and not teams just playing out 10 minutes of no individual skill, no, that's why this guy is a pro and I'm not type of feeling. And then the game is just over because, he fucking killed 1 minion too much in top lane. Such a shame. And then the wave didn't bounce, and then top laner got fucked. And, like, how is that even? That is enjoyable for a certain period of time, but eventually you just want that Gucci action in the house.
Yeah. I mean, in Overwatch, I don't know that I agree on your point that Overwatch won't be around, or like that it'll eventually. Well, it
It's
will
not gonna
eventually
lift
die.
off. It's gonna stay this way.
I like disagree with that point because I think that there is enough there, and there is enough nuance and sort of, um, there is enough potential to build really interesting plot points and storylines and like different moves around the scene to where you can build pretty big fan bases, and I think that it will be up to teams to teams and players to sort of build up their own brands, and then it'll be up to Blizzard to add more features to like improve the spectator experience. And I think that that will ultimately lead to Overwatch eventually being a really big esport. And as we've seen with sort of esports in their first years, they're pretty small, and Overwatch has started like a lot bigger than most other games because it's like not a broken game when it came out. But I think we'll see that it'll over the next 2 years it'll steadily like increase its viewership as it involves like more of its casual players and more players that aren't necessarily even Overwatch players, right? And as we sort of get those people involved, the viewing numbers are going to go up, the numbers are going to go up, and then we're going to see like really big tournament organizers like ESL having Overwatch tournaments at things like IEM, right? And I think it'll just be a matter of time before Blizzard finds the right formula to where you can watch competitive, like you can watch competitive Overwatch without it being just like a head-aching noise fucking disaster fest. And
But you
as
do.
long, yeah,
Okay, yeah.
go
Go
for it.
ahead.
No, go for it.
As long as.
Like as long as we have players and teams that work on building their brand, so that we can have fans consistently coming back to see their favorite player like play the game.
Which, considering the amount of money that's in there by Blizzard, they'll continue to do. No worries.
Yeah. But what was your point?
But you do agree, regardless, that the game has to change pretty drastically on a visual and particle point of view.
I think that it can be done through the spectator mode only. I think that the visual clutter, noise, and problem isn't there when you're playing the game to like nearly as much, to like a nearly as high extent as it is when you're watching, because I think the context of you controlling the champion and activating certain abilities allows your brain to filter out the sort of,
Other stuff.
yeah, exactly. So you know exactly why there's a fucking Zarya beam going straight ahead from your gun because you're the one shooting it, right? Well, if you're watching the game and Zarya is like beam, 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 giant circle ball bomb, right? And you're just like,
Yeah.
what the fuck just happened? Your brain does not process that very well, especially since like as she's doing the giant circle bomb thing, she's also like putting on her shield, so like the screen like color changes because now she has a shield on her because you're watching it from first person, and she also put a shield on someone else, so there's like this giant red like ball of shieldness like in the middle of the screen, and you're just like, what the fuck is happening?
Then we add a Roadhog ulti, and then you don't see anything.
Yeah, and then you add a Roadhog ulti, and it's just like, all right, like he's shooting at
The
me. It's like,
screen is black. Bye.
and then like instantly you get like knocked back into a wall, and and then you like get slapped by Anna's dart, and you're still like watching your ultimate like while you're dead.
The best thing, I mean, there was a time when Hanzo was quite popular, and the best thing is still having a Hanzo ultimate go through a team fight in third-person view, because you don't see anything.
Here's the thing: I think that sort of you still see more than if you would be watching that from like a first-person perspective, right?
Yeah, of course, but that's just going to say that there are like, especially Hanzo's ulti particle is just this massive like flashbang, honestly. Like even if I'm standing inside an ultimate, I'm just like, all right, I'm just gonna walk out because there's no point in me actually looking around and trying to see whether I have to dodge in a certain direction or peer to a certain enemy because I don't see him anyways.
Yeah, I guess.
Because the entire screen is just red.
And I think that comes down to you can have sort of different layers of priority to what you're viewing, right? So in the spectator mode, you can have settings that are like it's that say it's more important to see all the players than it is to see Hanzo's like ultimate particle, right? So you can see like giant red like bars of health that are going down as this ultimate is going through them, but you can still see the players through the ultimate, right? And I think it's sort of those adaptations that will eventually make Overwatch one of the biggest esports games ever.